Welcome to the Blazor Timeline tutorial. Here, I will show you how to get started with the Syncfusion Blazor Timeline component. The Syncfusion Blazor Timeline displays data in chronological order, offering a visually compelling and user-friendly experience to showcase user activities and progress. It includes built-in features such as orientation, content alignment, and template customization to enhance user interaction and customization options. Before proceeding, ensure that you have the .NET 8.0 SDK and Visual Studio 2022 installed on your machine, as only these framework and IDE options are utilized. After installing the necessary tools, launch Visual Studio 2022 and click Create a new project from the dashboard. From the list of project templates, select the Blazor web application. Next, provide the project name and location. I am using .NET 8 as the framework for this project, and have selected the Auto Render mode for both server and WebAssembly apps under the Interactive Render Mode section. Apart from this option, there are 4 other options for choosing interactive render modes. To learn more about interactive render modes, check out the video linked in the YouTube card above. Furthermore, I'll continue with the project creation with Global Interactivity location. When I click the Create button, the project creation will start, and initially the component will be rendered from the server. Simultaneously, the application will download the assemblies to the client. Now the application is ready to use. Next, I will show you how to add the Syncfusion Blazor Timeline component. First, I need to install the NuGet package into my application. So I open the NuGet Package Manager, switch to the Browse tab, search for Syncfusion Blazor layouts, and install the latest version. I also install the latest version of Syncfusion Blazor themes to host script and CSS files. After installation, I navigate to the Imports Razor file and add the Syncfusion Blazor layouts namespace, which allows me to utilize the Blazor Timeline component within the Pages folder. Next, I open the client-side program CS file and add the Syncfusion Blazor namespace. Then I register the Syncfusion Blazor service to utilize the timeline component. Also, add the services in the server-side program CS class. Next, to host the script and CSS for the timeline component, I navigate to the AppRazor component and refer to the CSS file from the installed package. I also include the script reference here. Now that everything is configured, let me add the Syncfusion Blazor Timeline. I open the Home Razor component and replace the default code and define the Blazor Timeline component code inside the division element. Then define the timeline items tag inside the timeline component, an array that can contain any number of timeline item definitions. Since I plan to add 4 items, I define 4 timeline item tags. Let's run the example application. You can see the timeline rendered with the provided 4 items. Next, I plan to display a series of data chronologically to track progress. I add the code block. Within the block, create the public class named timeline item model. Within this class, I add a string property named content. To generate the collection of content, I create a timeline items list of type timeline item model class to store this content. Then, within the list, I set the array of content for the timeline component. Next, I remove the existing 4 timeline item tags by replacing the for each loop. I plan to utilize all the content from the timeline items list through the for each loop. Inside the loop, I define a single timeline item tag. Within this tag, I set the content tag and populate the content using item to utilize all the contents from the timeline items list. Now you can see the timeline rendered with the provided content. Next, I'll show you how to add opposite content. To do this, I add a string property named opposite content inside the class. Then I update the array of opposite content in the timeline item list. Afterward, I define the opposite content tag inside the timeline item tag and set the opposite content using item to utilize all the contents from the timeline items list. Now you can see the timeline rendered with the provided opposite content. Next, I'll show you how to customize the appearance of the dots and connector lines. To achieve this, I'll set the .css property to indicate state success and assign the CSS class property to completed. Then I'll apply CSS styles to customize the color of the dots and connector lines. Now you can see the timeline rendered with the provided customization of dot and connector line. Next, I will demonstrate how to customize the timeline alignment in Timeline component. There are 4 different alignment options available: before, after, alternate, and alternate reverse. Let me explore each alignment one by one. First, I'll set the alignment to before. Look, now you can see the item content is positioned to the left with opposite content to the right. For horizontal orientation, the item content is placed at the top and opposite content is at the bottom. Next, I'll change the alignment to after. Now you can see that the timeline contents return to their original positions. Moving on to the alternate alignment. Notice that the item content is arranged alternately regardless of the timeline orientation. Now let me switch to alternate reverse. You can see that the item content returns to its original position. Next, I will demonstrate how to reverse the timeline in the Blazor Timeline component. First, I remove the alignment property to avoid any confusion. Then I set the reverse property to true. Now, observe that the timeline items are displayed in reverse order, enhancing adaptability and improving user interaction. Next, I will illustrate how to enable orientation in the Blazor Timeline component. To do this, I remove the reverse property and set the orientation property to horizontal. Now you can see that the timeline is rendered with a horizontal orientation. Next, I will demonstrate how to customize the content template in the Timeline component. First, I remove the orientation for clear understanding purpose. To begin, I plan to display the description and information of the content. To achieve this, I add the description and information properties within the Timeline item model class. Then I update the description and information details in the timeline items list. After updating the model, I replace the existing content with a tag with a container class for the content template. Within this division tag, I set the content using an item inside the division tag. This tag is used to customize the appearance of the template. Similarly, I add the description and information details. Finally, I apply CSS styles to customize the appearance of the content template. It includes template color, border color, fonts, width, and height of the template. Also change the height of the timeline to 500 pixel for template content. Look, now you can see the timeline rendered with the content template. Now let me summarize. I showed you how to create a Blazor web app and add Syncfusion Blazor Timeline component. Also, I covered how to customize Blazor Timeline component appearance. If you want to see the working code of this example, you can download it from the GitHub link in the description below. I've also provided a link to see if you qualify for a free community license to use all our Blazor products. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.